It doesn't take that much to kill bacteria. I mean, bacteria really, they can stand things about as much as we can stand things. But imagine you're a little salmonella creature and you're in this 140-degree environment. That's going to hurt your whole body, experiencing 140-degree temperature. That's just a lot. So they don't last long doing that. When it's this warm, all they have to be in there for is maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and it'll kill them, just like that. So I'm going to go up to speed 3 with this, actually speed 4. Crank it right up. We're going to go full volume on this, going for a nice meringue. When you make meringue, this is exactly what you do. 2 parts sugar, 1 part egg. Big white. I think it's quite warm right now. So what buttercream really is just meringue that has butter in it. But in order to get the butter in there, we have to first whip it up to full volume and we have to cool it down. What would happen if I put all that butter in here when it's still piping hot? It'll melt the butter. And if it melts the butter, that's going to cause a problem because the meringue will just collapse. And you'll end up with a greasy, sort of gooey liquid. And that's about all you'll get. But if you wait till it's cool, it will mix in nicely and the air will get incorporated into the butter. You get a nice fluffy icing. It's really wonderful. So, I'm going to let that go for a little bit. Let's go with that whip. Other things I need to consider when it comes to making meringue. Remember, we're working with just egg whites here, and we can't have any contamination in those egg whites. That means no egg yolk. Okay? No trace of grease or butter anywhere. So we want to make sure it's a clean bowl, a clean whip, clean hands. I had one guy had his completely collapsed yesterday. He couldn't figure out why. I said, was there any butter anywhere nearby? Turns out he had some butter on his glove. And it probably got on the inside of the bowl, contaminated the mixture, and it just collapsed. No matter what he did. By that time he had not put his butter in yet. So I said, okay, here's what you do. Just keep the butter. But, you know, next time, next class, you'll go ahead and get some more eggs, more sugar together, and you'll make another batch. But at least not all was lost at that point. He asked me before he put the butter in, you know. But it turns out a little bit of butter got in there first. And when butter gets in there too early, it'll melt and destroy the whole mix. Now, I don't know about you, but cracking eggs can be rather tedious. And it's really nice if you can, you know, do it right the first time. But it happens. Things get in there. Contamination gets in there, and then you just have to redo it. So this should start to accept air pretty soon. Meringues are almost always made with 2 parts sugar, 1 part egg white. When we made angel food cake, we made one with a little less sugar, and you could see how much less stable it was. We had to use like cream tartar to give it stability. This gets a lot more stable just because it has so much more sugar, but it doesn't get as much volume as it normally would with a straight egg white.
If you added flavor, it'd be towards the end after the butter.
I do it after the butter. Yeah, so if you want your flavoring like coffee or, you know, peppermint oil, things like that, if you want to put that kind of thing in, after the butter's in there, you can't hurt this stuff very much. Because the butter is the stabilizing factor for it. So, yeah, if I want to add something, I just add then. If I want to add vanilla, it's a good way to start. Lemon extract, any of the extracts work fine. The butter will accept quite a bit of liquid just because it is butter, and the one who cracked those eggs, right?
Who cracked the eggs?
And there could have been a tiny little bit of contamination in there. Even a small amount of egg white or egg yolk in there could cause the problem. I just may not have seen it. It may have been something very small. It also could be, it looked like my whip was clean. I assume it was clean. You know, but clearly, after all that time, we still don't have a meringue. And that means there's something. Something must have slipped its way in there. So I'm not going to get buttercream this time. And I've got good room temperature butter ready to go. Everything's ready to go. My gloves and hands are clean. But clearly, that's not a meringue. That's not even soft peak yet. It's starting to accept a little bit of air, but it's not accepting the way it should. And that means that something was wrong. Something was contaminating. So even if you think you've got it right, if you get this kind of a result, if you get this soupy result, then that's a clear sign that something got in there. And what does that mean? Well, it means going back to the drawing board. You know, crack some new eggs, measure out some new sugar. I still have my butter, so I can still go from there and pick up from where I left off. But obviously, I would take this back, probably downstairs. I'll get this thing piping hot, good and clean. You know, maybe even take a lemon and squeeze the lemon juice in there just to make sure it's clean. What will lemon juice do?
Absolutely keep the fat, right?
Yeah, it'll just keep the fat right off the surface of the metal. So it'll make sure that if there's any butter, any trace of oil or dirt, that it doesn't get in there and contaminate my egg whites. I'm also going to take great care when I crack the eggs to make sure I don't end up with a little bit of you know, egg yolk in there or something like that. Who knows? It could have been the container that the egg whites were put in. The person cracking the eggs might have done a fine job, but you know how the containers are when they come out of the wash. Sometimes they're pristine clean, but if that water isn't piping hot and soapy, we can end up with something on that plastic container. Maybe a little residue of butter that was left over from the previous user. So that may not be anybody's fault, except that, you know, it just didn't get cleaned quite as well as it should. So all of these are reasons why it's good to troubleshoot this sort of thing. As I say, I'm not embarrassed. This is something that we all have happen to us. And I've had this happen to me many times before. So if it happens to you, you know what to do.